Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and cannabis industry enthusiasts, welcome to NCIA's Industry Essentials webinar series. If this is your first time joining us, our Industry Essentials webinar series is the cornerstone of our digital educational platforming, providing you with timely, engaging, and essential education when and where you need it most. Today's session is part of our NCIA Committee Insight series, where we partner with one of our 14 member-led committees to bring you top-notch industry knowledge. As the legal cannabis industry continues to grow exponentially, the need to address historical inequities and create a platform for those adversely affected by cannabis laws has never been more pressing. In today's webinar, we've designed a conversation to shine a light on the importance of social equity in cannabis delivery requirements and regulations, and more importantly, provide actionable solutions for a more inclusive industry. Thank you all for joining us today, and get ready to dive deep into the world of social equity in cannabis delivery. We have an outstanding panel of experts lined up to guide us through this essential discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome the moderator for today's conversation, Kenya Alexander Davis from Green to Green Solutions, as well as the committee organizer for NCIA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. You can come on this camera right now, Kenya. I'll activate everybody else's video feeds as well. And we're going to get started by having you lead the panel through some quick introductions so everybody can learn more about each of their businesses and their role within the cannabis industry. So without further ado, I'll turn it right over to you to get the conversation started.
Hey guys, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate y'all being a part of this discussion. I'm Kenya Alexander Davis, technically, but whatever. I am the owner of Green to Green Solutions, and we offer fractional CFO services to cannabis touching businesses. And I'm so excited to have all of these beautiful people here with us today to join in this conversation and really to lead this conversation and inform us about delivery. So without further ado, let's start off with Mark. If you could give us a quick introduction of who you are and why you're on this webinar today.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. I'm excited as well. My name is Mark Salam, the CEO and founder of iComply. We are the oldest cannabis compliance company in the game, starting back in 2011. But I originally joined the cannabis industry out of Colorado for social justice, which was not even a conversation really happening at the time, fighting for patients' rights more than anything else. And as social equity became a more important issue, we helped found one of the founding members of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee at NCIA and ran representation and policy council for a lot of our DEIC objectives and initiatives, and still work on some of the New York advisory councils on working with other industry organizations that are in this space to try and create good policy, which turns into regulation, which of course impacts compliance. So just a lot of years of experience since 2011, going on 12, 13 years at this point, on just helping out with all of those nitty-gritty details that everybody really loves to do, called compliance. And we're here to kind of help navigate those waters, especially for minorities like myself and folks that are in the social equity space. So thanks for having me.
And yeah, cannabis industry years are like dog years. So you've been in the game a minute. So thank you for all that you do. Bryce, let's go to you next.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. To everybody, I am Bryce. I'm one half of Euphorium Oakland, which is a cannabis delivery service owned by my mother and I. It is we're the oldest Black woman family operated delivery service in the East Bay in Oakland, California. Been around since 2016, and so it's a pleasure to be here. Really, my goal for being here is to share our story, but also hear other people's stories, and really just have some hope. As you guys know, this industry changes every second, every day. And so we just need a little bit of hope to keep us going. And that's really where we're at with everything. So just seizing the opportunity and thankful to be here and thankful for everybody that's here.
We're super grateful to have you too. So thank you for taking the time. And TT, the Black woman behind everything, let's hear about you and why you're here.
Well, my name is Charlita T.T. Brown. Like I said, like Bryce said, I co-own Euphorium with him. Been doing it since 2016. I started in the medical market, the Proposition 215 market, and then transferred over in 2018. My number one claim to fame, though, is that I'm Bryce's mom.
Let's go.
I love that. That's beautiful. Y'all, Michael may come back in. We dropped him, and so when he comes back in, we'll allow him to give his intro. But we're gonna go ahead and jump right into the conversation. TT, while we're on you, I just want to get from your perspective, what is social equity and what does that mean in this space to you?
What it meant to me was that for the first time in a long time, they're going to be leveling the playing field. And the people who have been affected the most, the community that's been affected the most by cannabis, incarceration, convictions, that they should also have a very strong place at the table. Oakland Social Equity Program, I believe, was the first in the nation. And when I went to the city council meeting for it, and they gave us the agenda, and the first figure or graph showed that Blacks got arrested 400 times more than whites. So for the first time in my 54 years, it almost looked like reparations.
So do you feel like has your viewpoint changed a little bit as it's gone on, as this social equity has really started to expand?
Yes, I don't think it's enough, to be honest. I don't think it's enough. And in the way that Oakland did it was different. I feel like if you got a lot of money, millions of dollars to put together a cannabis program, and you're working with people who don't have business acumen because they're coming from the cop beats that have been most affected by cannabis drug arrests, you're setting them up for failure. If they have no business acumen, how do you know how to run a business?
Yeah, I know that we talked a little bit about that. Before I go into this, I just want to take a break and pause and let Michael introduce himself because he's an important part of this conversation. So Michael, can you just let us know who you are and what you're doing here today, why you joined this webinar today?
Hey y'all, so sorry. I don't know what just happened with my computer, technical difficulties, but I'm Michael Diaz-Rivera calling in from Denver, Colorado. I'm the owner of Better Days Delivery, and I'm calling in today because I'm an advocate for social equity, hoping us to get an equitable industry.
Awesome, thank you. And then just hopping up for what TT was saying, TT, you were saying that things have changed throughout and that the social equity program was not enough and it really didn't set people up for success. I know that Mark talked a lot about that. Mark, can you give a little bit more insight into that aspect of things?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with TT. It's not enough. And we've seen a lot of states with great intentions really mess up and drop the ball on a lot of key areas. And TT, you hit the nail on the head. Without technical business acumen and assistance and a team behind these social equity operators in accounting, in legal, in marketing, in
Consulting, even help with the decision.
Yeah, you're setting them up for failure. We're seeing Colorado say, all right, take a 10-week course by the people who took the pie in the first place to teach you how to get a piece of the pie and expect that to be good enough. And frankly, from the graduates we're seeing from those types of programs, it's not enough, right? There's certain things as the educational level and knowledge, but most people aren't going to become an accountant overnight. They're not going to become an attorney overnight. And those professionals require getting paid, even if we give social equity discounts because we care about the cause. There's still a time value exchange for money that kind of brings me to my second pillar, which is it's not enough without the technical assistance. And then it's absolutely crucial that there's financial assistance for social equity. The war on drugs itself has put people into an inequitable position when it comes to socioeconomic reality. We can see this in the hoods that many of us come from. And the reality is that without that financial pillar as well, and we've seen that sort of be attempted, we've seen that be reimbursable in California, which doesn't work because how are you going to pay the money in the first place to get reimbursed on the back end and then wait with your credit card fees or interest charges? Or Illinois, where it came much too late and can't pay for the initial applications anyway. So all those applications were mega guys doing predatory contracts or tokenism, and they were able to submit 40, 50 applications at a time instead of just one because they had the money to do so. Or we see New York that's bringing on way too late and financing their $150 million with the match up to the state much later than we're already letting CRARUD applicants go out the gate. And now they just said, screw it, through social equity out the window. And the judges are saying we're going to have to open up the whole program. So we're seeing these little bitty failures. I mean, Colorado's a $25,000 grant. How are you going to get your business off the ground that way? You
Yeah.
can't even qualify for a $150,000 loan unless you've been in business for 18 months making money. So look at a place like Connecticut that has a 20% down on some of their programs, that maybe you can get an investor across the table to help put that 20% down so you can get the rest of that 80% loan at a lower interest rate that's fixed in and isn't, predatory. So I think those are really two key components that are missing from a lot of state programs. And they're also not considering the timeline in which you have to roll those things out. A 10-week course, you got to sit down with your accountants and attorneys for a while. You have to do business planning. And unless you have that time to really do so, to understand the full business you're about to walk into, they're setting folks up for failure.
Yeah, I mean, just to roll it back and to keep it real simple, remember, the people who get social equity permits in Oakland come from the cop beats that have had the most arrests. So we're talking about people who are living in communities who have low social and economic statuses, and also just don't have business acumen at all. Like, even with me, Bryce and I both are college graduates. I still didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I made a lot of mistakes in the process. But the other part of that is the competitors are coming in with big dollars. They've written into their business plans 1 or 2 years where they won't have profit. We can't live like that. We don't have the deep pockets. And the money the city does give us, we've been successful in getting grants, and we're in the process of getting another grant right now. There's no real assistance on teaching us on who can help us make decisions on how to spend the money, because what we've been doing so far may not have worked, or whatever it might be. There's no support in that. I think the best way to do social equity is to provide money, but to also provide an incubator, which is like a scaffold to protect you and to teach you how to run a business. That would have been the best way to do it. That's just my personal opinion.
Well, and I think it's interesting because delivery was such a staple in the legacy market, right? And it's been kind of an afterthought throughout the legal market, right? It's like people are not being intentional when they bring these delivery programs on, these delivery licenses on. So how does the history of delivery, like both in the legacy market and the legal market, how does that affect how y'all move, Michael?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because that's, for me, it's like a full circle moment of, I was a homeless high schooler delivering weed to survive, and now I've got a delivery business that's legal and is now helping me to survive and take care of my kids. And so just looking at the historical context and seeing how everything has come into play, you have to wonder how the legacy market is actually being considered with everything that's happening. Just like T just said, most social equity folks are coming from those areas that are targeted by the police, low income, just completely devastated by the war on drugs. And it's not accidental. So for us not to really put the support for these communities that we need to overcome that learning gap, you have to just think that sometimes it was set up for failure. I don't know if I really answered your question or started.
No, yeah, no, and I think that that's why this becomes a social equity issue, right? Because this is where our industry really came from. This was the foundation. Delivery was the foundation that like we were really built on, right? And it was our communities that were affected negatively from this. So that's how it becomes a social equity issue. Right, like what is your experience like with the history of the plant, the history of delivery? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for me, my perspective is different in the sense that I didn't necessarily come from a legacy market, right? I'm somebody who, was in school playing basketball, doing music, I, smoked cannabis recreationally as I got into high school. But, I had friends that were, now we know the legacy market, that were part of the legacy market. And I honestly looked down on them because I had the stigma attached to it. Like, are you selling weed? And like, that's just what I was thinking. Coming from a judgmental space, but really just not having any context or any history and understanding of the industry until I got in it. Now I get in it and see, no, these are people who were entrepreneurs at the time and just didn't know that was the only way that was laid out for them to make money, to survive, like Mike said, to take care of your family if that's what you were doing. And so for me, coming from the outside looking in, it wasn't until I actually got to be a part of the business, my mother, and kind of really seeing like, no, this is an opportunity for us to have some seat at the table, to have, be able to create a legacy is something that we've historically, been jailed and criminalized for. And so being a part of it now, although it's great to be a part of the industry and say, you know what, I have a legitimate business that, I can do with my mother. And at the same time, it's disheartening when I go to a lot of these trade shows, when I go to a lot of these conferences, and I see that yet and still the people that they're shepherding or putting on these, platforms don't look like us. And so it makes me wonder, like, how will this be different than any other industry? And to be honest with you guys, at this point in time, I don't think it will. I think we're seeing a lot of time, like my mother's speaking to in Oakland, in the Bay Area, there's a mass exodus, and a lot of the exodus of people who leaving are people who look like us. It's the small businesses. They just can't afford to stay afloat. Where these businesses, these big pharma, or not even big pharma, I'm sorry, the MSOs can afford to be in these industries, and they have money. And so it's just a matter of, like, how can we find our niche? How can we just dominate our lane? And how can we, tell our story and tell other stories in the space?
Yeah.
So it's hard. It comes with a lot of challenges, but at the same time, look, we're here, 7 years later, by the grace of God, and we may not be, as successful as we were, year one and year two, but each year we're having to change and alter what success looks like for us and be okay with that. And so lastly, I would say I'll envy a lot of people. I see people in the chats who are in emerging markets, or markets that just opened up. And I'm like, man, I remember those times, year one, year two, money's rolling in, everybody's happy. Oh, cannabis this, cannabis that. But I also know what it looks like once that, goes down. And like you said, Mark, before, you start seeing the $300 a pound and things like that. Like, we know what this looks like. And so I'm just in it to, say, my mother and I, like my mother said, like, at the end of the day, this is a family business. And so to be able to, to wake up every day and know that I'm in business for my mother and family, that's really what I do it for at this point.
It's motivating.
Mhm.
Well, and it's interesting you brought up, like, it's different. Emerging markets are different than the existing markets, right? The regulations change from state to state, sometimes from city to city, county to county, right? So, Mark, how do you feel like across, you work nationwide, right? You work with people in all markets. How are they addressing social equity when it comes to delivery? How are they putting that into regulations?
Yeah, so I mean, that's I think it's important to understand the history here. And Bryce kind of hit the nail on the head, right? Like, I knew my homies too, that we just had to go make a stop real quick, and there was a piece underneath the seat where you sat, and that was what was going on, to be able to make money and have that hustle and have that be the business. Plus, anybody that consumed weed was happy when your dealer showed up finally after 3 hours after fighting with their girlfriend or whatever, with a couple options. They didn't even know what the strains were. We're all happy to pick out stems and seeds. So there's a huge legacy component to just cannabis in general. But what you saw in the very beginning, especially in places like Colorado, was the exclusion of felons from the industry, right? And even back then, it was sort of tokenized as policy to say, no, that's the right thing to do, is make sure this is all legitimate people, without realizing that that's going to make less than 3% of these owners black or brown. And so there was never any equity in the first place to get some medical marijuana licensing, or to get into the industry at that $10,000 price tag you could have back in Colorado, where now some of those folks are multimillionaires from making lots of mistakes and having the freedom to do so because of the risk involved. So in a lot of ways, delivery was an afterthought, because it was stigmatized also with competition against dispensaries, and it was stigmatized also with how drug dealers operated. So because felons were bad, drug dealers aren't okay, I can tell you how much rhetoric was in the Capitol building and at these rulemaking committees about legitimate businesses and illegitimate businesses, or even illegal caregivers. Some of these other terms, which were, in hindsight, probably dog whistles to a certain degree. So you had delivery coming in as an afterthought. When people started to see George Floyd, when they started to see inequity in the industry, and made a stand and demand for more options. So hospitality and delivery, especially, as these newer concepts where social stigmatization is sort of diminishing, and we're bringing to the forefront the inequities of the cannabis industry. That's why we're so focused today on delivery. And I would say that, consumption is not up and going, y'all, but that is another huge area for established markets to be able to have an opportunity for social equity, if you can find the investors, if you can have people see the opportunity, versus what we're kind of seeing in the chat, which is these emerging markets that know they have to do this, that there's some minimum standard, especially, you're probably not going to see it in Alabama or Mississippi, but you are going to see it, coming up in the Northeast, especially in Minnesota, Maryland, these new states that are coming online, New York, and to varying degrees of success, right? Because MSOs can come in, as we just saw, and lawsuit the state and completely destroy some of these programs because they have deeper pockets. So as much as we think it's going to be good, a lot of these things are delayed. A lot of the implementation messes up. And what I see a lot of times in these emerging markets is exactly what Bryce kind of said, this feel good, everybody's excited, cannabis is coming, and look at us, pat us on the back for being great saviors and helping out all these people we affected once upon a time with the intention to do the right thing and having poor execution along the way. So every time we get our hopes up, every time we try to work with other industry associations that care about this to submit feedback to the rules, to write letters to these regulators, to try and have a voice at the table, because if you're not on the table, you're likely on the menu, right? And so it's important that we speak up, say something, and we do get some influence there. But at the end of the day, these court systems catch up, these money and lobbyists catch up. To do the work. It's hard to get anything through that is anything looking like equity. But again, maybe we can see it in new laboratories of democracy trying out new experiments, whether that's Maryland and their incubation program and their guaranteed grants for funding applications, or places like Connecticut with their loan programs. So still have hope, still got to fight the good fight. But yeah, equity is inherent. If you're fighting for social equity, inherently it means it's inequitable in the first place, right?
Yeah, one of the things that I think about, like, even from just the national level, right, is delivery is complicated when it comes to things like 280E. Like, are you subject to 280E? Well, that depends on the business, really, right? Like, it's completely different in California than it is in Colorado. CC, can you tell us a little bit more? Because I know that in California they have like a wholesale market, right? You guys can just buy the product and then deliver it from your warehouse.
We're just mobile dispensaries. Yeah, we're just mobile dispensaries. It's nothing different. We're just dispensaries on wheels.
And so the difference is, in Michael, in your perspective, in Colorado, what does that look like?
Yeah, in Colorado, we're a third-party delivery service, so we don't actually own any product. We just partner with dispensaries in order to operate. And so
you're like Uber, like logistics, essentially.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you have to have a contract. That dispensary decides whether or not you deliver for them. They gave them all the power to decide, and you can't be a delivery service for any dispensary, only ones you're contracted with. So there's only like 20-something dispensaries out of 200 and something in Denver that even signed up companies like Michael's to deliver. And the rest of them are just waiting it out to do their own delivery later, or to not involve themselves and to keep competing essentially against them. So you still hand in the power of the people that created the inequity in the first place. It's kind of a rough gig. And this last legislature, we didn't really get anything through. They lobbied up and defeated a lot of bills that would have made things more equitable. So hopefully,
cannabis is essentially going to be like every other institution, where black and brown is last and white is first.
Yeah,
it boils down to green.
And I think that's why we have these.
Yeah,
that's why we have these discussions, right? It's so that it doesn't, so we can do something on the front end to make sure that we don't end up like other industries, and it takes us talking about these issues and us
there's one area I think
doing the actual work, changing this from just a conversation to a change, right? To action. Exactly. Michael, I know you talked to some some delivery owners in other states. What is their experience? What have their experiences been like?
Yeah, and that's what I was just gonna say. So in my experience here in Colorado, we can't operate without dispensaries partnering with us. So after getting my license, it was almost a whole year until luckily Legal Services took a bet on me and they partnered with me. And then it was a year after that until I got my second dispensary partner. But we're even seeing in Massachusetts, I've reached out to my people with Your Green Package or Rolling Relief. They're having similar issues. They don't have enough money. The Social Equity Fund there basically has no money in it. They have a 2-driver rule that really makes it so the cost of payroll just is not sustainable. Same issue, well, not same issues, but similar issues in New Jersey, New York, Maryland, like we've been talking about. There's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, one area that I think is important to focus on, if we can't trust each of the states to get it right, it reminds me of the civil rights movement in the 60s, where some states got rid of segregation, for example, but we didn't see that in every state. And at some point, the federal government had to step in, right, in 1965 to be able to pass the Civil Rights Act. So if we're starting to talk rescheduling, descheduling, I think now is the time to have a conversation also about interstate commerce, which is delivery all over again, but in semi trucks between California and Colorado.
Yeah,
we need to
cross the state lines legally.
Early and now about what rescheduling looks like, because without a framework, this is going to be like 2018 Farm Bill all over again, where you just release the floodgates and the biggest players can rush to the market and dominate it without these sort of states having any say or control, let alone any points of taxation, standards between laboratories in different states and test results, and standards between packaging and labeling. Like, it takes a lot to move tobacco or alcohol between states. And similarly with cannabis, it's going to be the same. So the government needs to be really careful about how they reschedule or deschedule in that whole conversation without putting social equity at the forefront. That's going to be a huge issue too, because this might be the last chance we get for it to get done right on import licenses, export licenses, transportation and distribution licenses for social equity. And we tackled this pretty early on with the DEIC, and I know Brian has a link here he can share, but just talking about what interstate commerce might need to look like if it's going to include social equity as a consideration. And it's a bit long, and it's a 3-part piece on a policy piece, but I think it's really important, especially now that the Biden administration has signaled that they're moving towards rescheduling.
And ultimately, like, the implementation of these is going to come down to the state. So what are some things that, like, the state should be considering when they're writing these regulations? What are some of the complications that you guys have experienced? Bryce, I'll hand this one over to you. Have y'all experienced anything that makes delivery complicated in California and Oakland?
Yeah, and I was thinking about that as I'm hearing, Mike's story in Colorado and their experience. And to be honest, we didn't, other than like the initial hurdles to like, apply and go through just the bureaucracy that comes with working with government and state agencies. I can say from our experience that we really had a great experience from the standpoint of the city of Oakland really wanting to help us and make sure that we get the funding that we need. I think that's been a plus. I'm looking at Maybell's question too. I know we'll get into more depth, but I think other than like the funding, the technical assistance, the preferential points, I think one of the other things that is missing in Oakland is trying to do better is just bringing people from the community together. A lot of these businesses, my mother said it all the time, a lot of us operate in silos. We do our own thing, you do your own thing. We don't talk to each other. We don't communicate with each other. We don't find ways to work together to help, build each other up. Everybody's kind of like, on their own island, if you will. And that may have worked, in year 1 or year 2, but here we are 5 years later, and it's like, no, let's figure out ways to work together. And so I think maybe writing in legislation, I don't know how that would work specifically, but making it, just a requirement for us to meet, to talk, to discuss, to share our challenges, share our obstacles as a group, and know that. So if we operate in silos, you have the perception that you're the only ones going through this. But have we found time and time again, and talking to people who we know are in the Bay Area market? No, everybody's struggling. Everybody's trying to figure out a way to stay afloat. And so I think just doing that could help people a lot, because a lot of us just gave up, quite frankly, because of hope. We lost hope. And that's the thing. That's a real thing, and that's the only reason why we're still here, because we have some sort of hope. It may be a little inkling, all you need is the faith as a mustard seed, but at the same time, it's hard to do it by yourself and feel like, you're the only one going through this. So I think just from my standpoint and from my experience, that's been the one other thing that has been missing, is like, how can we work together? How can we talk? I know I have conversations with people who are local, and after getting off the phone with them, I can call my mom and say, hey, they're going through the same thing. And she's like, well, okay, that gives me makes me feel a little better, because we know we're not the only ones going through it. So I think just being able to be in a position to, talk to other people. And let's be frank, lastly, it's like, we know this is a new market. Like, every industry that you look at in the history, they had their challenges, they had their obstacles. I don't want to sit up here and think that it's all doom and gloom, because it's not. We've been able to, you know, be here and provide and do things that we wouldn't have ordinarily been able to do had we would not have our own business, something that we can call our own. And so from that standpoint, I just want to like stress that. Like, I know people, you know, listening and watching who may not have even been in this business yet may get discouraged, but I think you also have to be mindful of the reality of what it is. It's not all. I know what they report in the news is that it's $1 billion in revenue and X, Y, and Z, and that's fine. But we're like, who the hell making that money? Because I know we're not.
Yeah, ain't us. It ain't us. Yeah.
So
And we see some states trying to, just to address Chris Jensen's question, like we do see like Maryland, they're trying to help out with social equity by allotting a certain percent of the taxes collected to social equity funds, right? But how can, is it Mark, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so I mean, it is something that every state needs to invest into if they're going to have a successful social equity program. As we talked about, the main pillars there are financial assistance and technical assistance. So incubator, applaud the efforts, assuming the people in the incubator aren't predatory and are truly trying to help, which means having good vetting process instead of, you know, conflicts of interest or something like that, like we've seen in other social equity technical assistance programs. Because how can I trust the person teaching me what to do has a business license of their own to compete against me with? Like, that's a little bit off, right? So I think that needs to be clear, but also with regard to the money, sure, a piece of it has to be put up. But I'm not opposed to also, you know, public and private partnerships to make money. An interest rate loan program, this is how we manage our national debt. This is how we manage bonds for municipalities. So it's very, very possible that you could have private lending team up with state funds like we're seeing in New York, and be able to offer low interest loans, startup capital, for our social equity operators to at least be pre-approved so that they can then go talk to an investor without being preyed upon, right? So if I'm pre-approved by the government for $1 million for my dispensary, but I only have to come up with $200,000 on the loan as a down payment, right? Then I don't see the problem me walking up to an investor at that point in, say, a place like Maryland or Connecticut, and being able to say, no, I got $1 million already. I just need 200,000 from you to get that $1 million. So why don't we partner up? And now there's a reason I own 51% of the business instead of you trying to, right, prey upon me and take that equity out of my hands. So I think it's really important as we design these financial structures that, yes, a piece of the government has to go into those programs, maybe grant money to start the application. But if you notice, like, Connecticut just went to a private solution. The private company is going to make money. Maybe a percentage of that is split off back to state revenues from the interest paid back on the loan. And you now have a more equitable partnership that comes to the table without that controlling interest, you know, sitting in a secret document somewhere to be bought out. So I think there's a number of different solutions that we can look at on the financial side without the state having to give up all the tax money that they need for roads, bridges, infrastructure, what governments want to use their tax money for. So I think that's important to look at as a potential solution, because New York did the same thing with finding a private fund to match what their real estate development property. They think they give up 50 million, look for another 100. So
I think that balance is important, right? Because if you depend on the government fully, then like it just it's not ideal, right? It's just not going to be something that's feasible or realistic. But if you depend on private investors too much, then you have that predatory behavior. So it definitely has to be kind of a balance there.
Definitely. I mean, when I worked for the government of Puerto Rico and lived there for 2 years and wrote the regulations and implemented the model, there was no conversation such as social equity, but we knew that we needed outside investment because the government was broke, right? They were looking at this, and this could be new countries, Belize or Panama or other places that are looking to set up programs, oftentimes don't have the money in the budget to do so. So you're expecting revenues in the future on taxes that don't exist now to be able to fund these programs. So we had to get creative and innovative about how to attract that foreign investment. And I don't think there's anything wrong with good partnerships that can provide that technical assistance in the partnership, as long as people aren't being preyed upon and the technical advisor gets the appropriate size of the piece of the pie that makes it fair and equitable.
And also, like when we talk about financials in the delivery space, it's really hard to make money. They have regulations like, I know, where is it, Michael, that has like you have to have 2 drivers? Is that like everywhere, or is that?
Yeah, that's Massachusetts. Yeah.
And so
Sorry, sorry if I cut you off, but no, that's one of the things. And I think T was mentioning this earlier. Money is a major issue for social equity folks throughout the states. And so in Massachusetts, where folks already, well, no, not even Massachusetts, anybody coming from an impoverished background, if you're already strapped for money, you don't have a financial runway to compete with a lot of these big pocket folks. And so if you have to pay for 2 employees and then your revenue just isn't coming in to justify it, how do you keep in business? Or Colorado, something that I'm struggling with now that I'm getting ready to bring on my first delivery drivers is, how am I making sure that I have the volume and the deliveries to justify these worker expenses? And so, yeah, financial backing is a major thing, that any program that isn't really bringing any type of financial backing, you have to ask how serious it is.
Well, and then you have to be able to market, advertise so that users, right, buy delivery. I see DoorDash commercials. I know what it is. That same concept applies. Not everybody really advertises and markets that delivery is available. So people just conveniently go, to the liquor store kind of a thing. But it's again a question of, do the point of sale companies then, Michael, step up and since they're encouraged to have more people, more activity on their websites, etc., or weed maps, or where do we find that right balance for marketing and branding delivery so that you have volume like that in order to justify the hiring of employees or additional overhead and expenses?
Yeah, and I like to think it's all of them, of like everybody has a piece to play in it. And where Colorado, so in my opinion, before it was legal, that last mile, that's how people got their weed, was delivery. And then it became legal, and brick and mortar was the way that we trained consumers to get their weed, is you walk into the store to buy it. And now that's just what customers are used to. And now it's time to market and show them that there's just another option. We don't want to stop you from going into the brick and mortars, but for those that need that convenient option of delivery, there's another way for you to get your product. And since everybody is profiting from it, we all could share in marketing it. And then even more so to push it, since we're all profiting off this plant, could we do something for those people that are locked up for this plant still?
Well, and it's interesting you talk about that, because I'm a person, I like to go, if I can, I live in Texas, y'all, but I like to go to a dispensary because I get to learn, right? And that's a huge issue that comes with delivery, is that there's not enough information out there. There's not enough ways to get information about the different strains, about what this can help with you. And it's a huge issue that translates over to delivery, because there's just no way to educate your consumers.
Exactly.
Bryce, I wanted to talk to you because when we talk about the financial planning, when you're going into a market, I know you guys have like a minimum order because you can sell wholesale. How did y'all develop that financial plan? How did you use the regulations to inform that?
Yeah, so like you spoke to, for us, because we're able to buy, the products directly through wholesale, through the brand, through the distributors of the brands. We have it set up in our e-commerce POS system to where, based on zip codes, there's a specific order minimum, obviously, because some places take us longer to get to for the distance, and so based on that, we set our prices that way. And usually, I'm sure you guys can relate, we get our highest best margin on flour. Still at this point, even though things are the prices is changed a lot, and so for us, it just being able to factor in obviously making revenue, but also factor in taxes that we have to pay now, with excise taxes being on us to pay. All of that kind of, we have to factor that in, and usually in those instances when it's time to have a new regulation comes about, we work with our CPA to kind of make sure that the numbers make sense for where our clients aren't experiencing sticker shock, but at the same time, it's reasonable enough for us to make some revenue and have some cushion on that end. And so obviously some product categories, the margins are less than others, but that's really the goal for us, is to kind of really be able to factor that into our price and what we get it for wholesale and then what we sell it for retail. And so,
And then Michael, you don't really have that option, Michael. You have to, I mean, based on the regulations in your state, you have to have a completely different business model. What does your business model have to be? And how do you set your prices?
Yeah, really my prices are more set by the dispensary since they own the product. They set the majority of that. I am included in some of those conversations, so I do have an input. But yeah, right now, what we have in Colorado is a third-party delivery service, also known as the pizza model. So basically, they own the product, they package the product, and we just deliver it. So the majority of what we have the input in is the delivery fee, and that's where we get our money. So that's how we set it up, is based on our local rules. And then we try to find other ways to bring revenue based on that.
And since you kind of worked, like I'm sure with both types of businesses, business models, Mark, like, is there one that you think is more beneficial to like social equity and really business in general than the other?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there's only equity if you're making margins, right? If you're making crumbs off the pie, you're not eating the pie. So it's not fair to give Michael $10 delivery, $20 delivery, whatever it is, and not let him also participate in the margins between, record low prices right now that the dispensary buys at and same prices they selling it to the consumer at. So that margin's gotten fatter, but none of that fat has gone down towards social equity. So, I mean, to me, it's pretty obvious we need that change in Colorado, these non-storefront delivery options, because it's not equitable to just be at the will of a dispensary paying you a flat rate fee to bring product from their dispensary to a customer and making that customer pay your fees anyway. So it doesn't eat into the dispensary. It's only beneficial. And yet we have less than, 10% of the Denver market even participating in delivery. So yeah, I'd rather give social equity people more agency of themselves, more choice, and more margins.
And I think we talked about really how to change this from just a conversation. I think it's so important. The reason why I'm here is because I really do believe in this plant and I believe in our people being a part of this industry. And so how do we now take these conversations that we have? What can people be actually doing to advocate? How do we go to our legislators and make a difference? What can we do? And that's to everybody. That question is to the floor. Like, what are y'all doing, and how can we be a part of that?
I mean, Michael and I have definitely tried to, solicit peer feedback on what would be substantial changes. There's challenges when you go into this because there's other, even social equity folks that might have differing opinions. One thing that really killed the bills last year is nobody was organizing on the same page with asking for what changes we could all agree to. Most people agree 90% of the time, they might disagree 10% of the time. So it's really important to stick to the same page on what those 90% of the same things are. And even having said that, if you're disorganized, the industry did this in the very beginning with each other, right? Where they were at each other's throats, they were fighting each other over what each opinion thought was best. But now they're really organized and much more funded than we are with our lobbyists. So sometimes it takes taking off time from business to show at the Capitol yourself, meet your legislators, call them, email them. It takes work, and you can't expect somebody else to do it, especially if you're supposed to be united and fighting some of these very well-organized, well-lobbied organizations. But that really is where the change happens. This is all just little words on paper, y'all, defining reality that we call laws. So you can go change little words on paper, or at least try to make it a more equitable world through the changing of legislation, policy, and regulation.
Yeah, no, and to build on that, that's so important. And before starting this business, I was the type to say, I don't involve myself in politics.
Same.
And now I realize you really have to. And even just like Bryce was saying, we have to remind ourselves that we're all united. We have to work together, especially us small folks. If we're not working together, we're just on the menu, like Mark said. And so, yeah, it's like that little, I'm thinking of that meme with the one little fish compared to like the 20 bunch of fish together. And you have to work together. You have to empower each other to show up. We all have different strengths and weaknesses. So wherever I can't fill in, Mark fills in. And wherever Mark can't fill in, Kenya's coming in right after that. So yeah.
And I was gonna say too, to add to that, I know just in my experience and where we're located, there's still like a huge educational barrier that exists. Like as much as the recreational market in California has been around since 2016, I believe, 2017, around the time. A lot of people that I know still don't, go to the dispensary, still don't operate in that world. They still operate in the legacy market because why? Because there's no taxes to be paid. The prices that they're used to paying, they want to keep paying those prices, which I understand, and I get it too. I get it 100%, and so it's still an uphill battle from that standpoint. Like for instance, just context about last month we did like an event where we vended at like a local Oakland collective who's been around for a decade now, done some great work in the community, just bringing people together. And we realized like we had products to sell, but we really didn't sell any because most of the people were not used to that market. Like people that were there initially, like I feel like there's even a barrier for that. There's people who's on the side of the rec market and well, let's do it this way, and there's people on the side of like, no, the legacy market is where I'm going to stay because that's the most beneficial, that's the most cost effective for me. And I get both sides of the world. And so it's how do you bridge that gap? How do you kind of like, be on both sides of the playing field? Because I understand like the legacy market it makes more sense that you're somebody who's still in the legacy market. Why would you want to come legal when right off the bat you're gonna be dishing out money and dollars on overhead? You may not see that back for years, if ever. And so I think it's just a lot of educating that still has to go on. And I think with time, hopefully that will change. But that's really my focus, is try to be in a position to educate, but also understand the legacy market as well, because that's where all this starts on. If we didn't have a legacy market, none of this would even be a conversation. And so I realized that, and I realized that, although I don't have personal firsthand experience in that market, it's something that I don't frown upon anymore like I used to before I was in this industry. So that's how I look at it, just education of self.
Yeah.
And I really think the burden to make sure that legacy operators are not excluded from the market is on our legislators, right? Like, but they're not going to do it if we don't push them to, right? And we have to be the voices for the people who were affected by the war on drugs. That's our responsibility as people participating in this industry, to make sure that those voices don't go unheard, and make sure that there's space in the legal market for people to really start a legacy, right? To go to legacy and start a legacy in the legal market. So yeah, like just do. And I really think the burden to make sure that legacy operators are not excluded from the market is on our legislators, right? Like, but they're not going to do it if we don't push them to, right? And we have to be the voices for the people who were affected by the war on drugs. That's our responsibility as people participating in this industry, to make sure that those voices don't go unheard, and make sure that there's space in the legal market for people to really start a legacy, right? To go to legacy and start a legacy in the legal market. So yeah, like just do. I think we have a couple questions in the Q&A. We're going to just go all to that section. We have a question from Angelita Green. What are the ways that education can get out and can be helpful? Anyone want to take that question?
I honestly think this is one of the areas that we put in the social equity policy paper that we wrote about interstate commerce. But unless we give enough time for these markets to breathe, and enough time to educate the most impacted populations of these options, I think it is something that the government should be doing. What we have seen in the past is that generally privileged consultants go out to these hoods and these neighborhoods and do their education, and they end up tokenizing and preying upon people, right? So you can make a quick $100,000, $150,000, maybe even $200,000 or $300,000, but you'd never then own a piece of the business, make decisions in it or anything else. They just use you for your background and where you came from. So I think, one, we have to educate our people why that's not the best idea when you could make millions over the lifetime of your family. But two, also just try to be aware of that behavior, which means I think there's been some government-sponsored education that rolls out first, long before applications do, because you really want to get to those communities where people are most impacted and help make sure that they're the most qualified, giving them that time to actually build a team, get the education they need, get through the funding and financing process, etc. So it doesn't mean rolling weed out immediately right away. It means slowing it down a little bit to allow for equity to catch up on what has been a decade-long head start by the industry.
Yeah. No, I think it's all about health equity, and that's with that education. That's how we get there, is educating our community just about how this plant can benefit us in multiple ways, not only just financially, but health-wise, and in the many different cultures and communities we got. So all the time I'm talking to elders and they're like, we know what the war on drugs did. We talking about reefer, that's a gateway drug. And then I started talking to them about psychedelics and they really think I'm crazy. So yeah, we got a lot of education to just relax folks and really get our benefit. And sometimes that takes time, like Mark said. So it's okay to slow it down and make sure we do it right.
I'm gonna put this question out here. Maybe Bryce, this is a good one for you. This is from Caroline. It says, I'm a Cal MPP 22 in the Bay Area who wants to get involved in social equity work, but I'm brand new to the industry. Obviously, the job market is tough, so I'm curious what advice this group has for someone who wants to get involved in policy work with limited experience in the cannabis industry. Area that do you know anything that they can get involved in?
Well, I know NCIA is
Yeah.
in the Bay Area, so I think that's a, that's a great starting point, and that's a great question, because I do know, like, on social media, which I kind of come across to with just relationships, there are a lot of like if cannabis events that go on, just mixers and opportunities for you to show face and network. And I'm not gonna sit here and say that I go to all of them and that I enjoy all of them. That's not the case. But I think that I know, and I'm sure everybody else in this webinar knows the power of just showing up sometimes. I know it's kind of like sometimes, you show up to places by yourself. It could be nerve-wracking. It could be a little nervous and X, Y, and Z. But I found that a lot of the things that my mother and I have been able to do with this business has come from just showing up, reaching out, Instagram and DM and email and cold emailing, picking up the phone, like whatever I could do to like get what I want done and accomplished. I learned that that's the easiest, or not the easiest, but that's the way that I know how to do it. That's where I come from, and just showing up sometimes and being a
second that. I second that, because I'll say, like, one of the things that has really jump started my experience in advocacy work is being a part of NCIA and joining the DEIC committee. I've really gotten to learn so much so quickly. So if you like are interested in any opportunities, like, NCIA has been a great resource for me, and joining a committee that you really want to learn something more about is a great place to start. So if you are not already an NCIA member, go ahead and sign up. It's the shameless plug for the NCIA. Y'all need to join. Okay, that's how you get started.
Yeah, I mean, the DEIC has been amazing. My only piece of advice to add to that is find the people that are aligned with you, that share that same passion, because this, like Michael said, it takes many fishes to fight this fight. And doing it alone, you can sometimes feel like you're drowning or isolated. So just finding the people that you can work with that are similarly minded, that get the work done, that care about the work, has made a huge difference, especially in like our New York policy work and in our NCIA policy work. I mean, that paper that we published there is amazing. And that was all done through collaborative efforts at the DEIC. So we have a pretty amazing group at NCIA for sure. And then if you're in Colorado, sync up with your local leaders who have a dog in the fight. Like people like Michael, he keeps you up to date on the 20 things happening in social equity in Colorado alone, and when you need to show up at the Capitol, what we need to say. And I'll do some more lobby day training, next year, so that we can teach more people how to engage legislators and what it's like to navigate the Capitol building. So the elders out there, the young elders like me, also should probably step up and offer these types of services for education and training and development, so that people really know how business operates, or how to engage with legislators so that they're better equipped and better prepared for really engaging at the level at which the cannabis industry moves. I tell people we're not in the business of buying and selling cannabis. First and foremost, we're in a political and a legal business. After that, we're in a regulatory compliance and licensing business. And then after that, you can buy and sell weed according to the other two things. So it's really important to understand that and put your priorities in place and understand where you need to engage based on what the landscape looks like, what the battlefield looks like.
Hey, I think that was a great way to wrap it up and pass it back to Brian. Thank you guys for having this conversation. It was super valuable. I've learned so much from y'all. I'm gonna pass this back to Brian to close it out.
Yeah, fantastic. I agree with you, Kenya. I couldn't agree more that that was a fantastic way to tie things all together and tie it back into the vital policy and networking work that NCIA is doing here to support these initiatives across the board. We're going to just, I guess, to piggyback on that question and tie this back all together to the next in-person activity that you could engage with NCIA. I couldn't encourage any of you all more to mark your calendars for next year's edition of our 12th annual Cannabis Industry Lobby Day event. As I've been posting inside the chat room, the first step to your journey joining NCIA, if you are a social equity applicant or license holder, is by applying for NCIA's Social Equity Scholarship Program. That program has been in place for a number of years now. The DEI committee in particular takes a very large role in managing and coordinating those efforts. And the first step to applying for that program is grant you 80% off annual membership dues with a very hefty discount for year 2 as well. That grants you the opportunity to join NCIA, post to our blog, join one of our 14 member-led committees alongside the diversity, equity, inclusion, and really get your hands dirty in the actual educational, community building, and advocacy work that we do on a daily basis here at NCIA. If you have more questions about that program, follow that link in the chat room. You can take a form to apply. Then somebody from NCIA's membership team will immediately follow up with you to provide more details and get you started on your journey as an NCIA member. We do biannual committee application periods. So in particular, right in advance of lobby days next year would be the first opportunity for you as a new NCIA member to apply for one of our 14 member-led specific and sector-specific committees as well. So this would all line up as a great sort of roadmap for you to get more involved with NCIA on a larger level. And then to second Mark's point, additionally, if you're on NCIA's website learning more about how you can get involved with our social equity scholarship program, I would reinforce that you head over to our Allied Association program directory page as well. A number of our California-based, Colorado-based, and East Coast-based advocacy partners are doing some amazing on-the-ground work in between now and next May as well. I definitely would encourage all of you all to learn more about the Minority Cannabis Business Association, who I believe is going to be coordinating some in-person lobbying efforts as part of their first in-person advocacy-focused event since post-pandemic as well, this coming November. So I believe their website is mcba.org. You can learn more about that, and I'm sure people can post some additional links here in the chat room. As always, huge shout out and thank you to the panelists that presented today's panel, Michael, Mark, Bryce, TT. Thank you all for that amazing expertise, and especially huge shout out and thank you to Kenya Alexander for rocking the moderator role. I think this is the first webinar that she's played that role for us here at NCIA, and I hope it will not be the last. So really excited to continue working with you to develop and produce these amazing programs over the next month.
This was fun. I stopped shaking a little bit into it. And so thank you for just giving me the opportunity to talk to these wonderful people.
Oh, no, fantastic. Thank you again, Kenya. I always love having this immediate satisfaction seen from the outro poll. We've got so many people that said this completely met their expectations and that all of the objectives were addressed. So thank you for leading this conversation and expertly weaving in so many additional perspectives here. Huge thank you and shout out to TT as well, who did have to drop off halfway through. So please, Bryce, extend our gratitude to TT's way later today when you see her. And yeah, as always, just want to close out today's program, giving a huge shout out and appreciation and give you all some additional activities NCIA is engaging in over the next few months to mark your calendar. So huge shout out to the 35 member businesses that have already signed on to support our annual Lobby Day event next year. If you have more questions about any of these pioneering businesses, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to help make a connection. And if you want to join their ranks, I'd be happy to give you some more details about all the deals that we're running on our sponsorship surrounding our Lobby Day event before the end of the year. So if you want more details, definitely mark your calendars now, reach out following today's program. And then additionally, leading up to our annual Lobby Days next year, we are going to be hitting the road once again for a new event series called NCIA Stakeholder Summits. These are specifically going to be hosted in a number of state capitals across the country in some of our most established membership markets and emerging markets that we hit this year with our industry, social, and cannabis caucus events. So definitely mark your calendars here. And if you have more questions about how you can get involved as a member, a sponsor, a supporter, or a partner, please feel free to reach out to me. As with all of our events, complimentary admission does come as part of NCIA membership. So again, just reinforcing that the equity scholarship program that I've linked constantly inside the chat room is your all's first opportunity to join NCIA and learn more about how you can take advantage of these benefits moving into 2024. I think that's the first time I've said 2024. All right. So perfect. Thank you all so much once again. And with that, this is the conclusion of NCIA's Industry Essentials webinar. Really appreciate all of your all's commitment to engaging in these influential conversations and driving positive change in the legal cannabis industry by taking times out of your day to join us today. Stay connected with us on social media, visit our website, and keep an eye out for some future webinars and events. If you have been in some of our previous webinars over the last few weeks, you saw the debut of a new policy-centric series called Policy Matters, as well as the return of our fireside chats with government relations teams. We're going to be hosting the next October editions of those in the first and second weeks of October, respectively. So stay on the lookout for more details surrounding those. We're going to be having a follow-up conversation focusing on the recent rescheduling recommendations that were released by the HHS, as well as an upcoming preview of the markup that's going to be taking place on the safer bill now, the Safe Banking Act, what is it evolved into in the next few weeks. So stay on the lookout to your email inbox for those details. Thank you once again, Kenya, Michael, Mark, Bryce, and TT. We'll leave you all with this member appreciation credit sequence that highlights the 45 member sponsors, as well as the 20 member businesses that joined us in today's audience. So thank you all as always. We'll hope to see you all next time, and have a great week until we see you again. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.